Topping today's news, debate on the new fiscal budget has begun in the House of Assembly. Members of the House remember the late parliamentarian George A. Smith, one of the men believed to be responsible for the beating death of a 65-year-old man on the weekend, arrested. And the Prime Minister announces a date for the National Insurance Board contributions to increase. Good evening, Bahamas. I'm Jarino Saunders. This is your JCN Evening News. It's a pleasure to have you join us. For the next 2 weeks, parliamentarians will be debating the 2023-2024 budget, a budget for security and progress. Prime Minister Philip Davis, who led off the debate this morning, says the new fiscal year budget centers on 3 pillars for national development, including national security, economic security, and personal security. Arla Sebastian has more in this next report.
The emphasis on security reflects our conviction that in order to thrive in the 21st century, we must grow stronger, invest in our resilience, and make our country less vulnerable to external shocks. Our country is finally moving on and in the right direction, gaining the momentum we need to make such changes and investments. The economy is open. The government's fiscal performance is improving. Bahamians are working. Businesses are thriving. And our children are making up for lost time in school.
While Prime Minister Philip Davis contends that it cannot be predicted what the next storm or plague may be, nor can one predict the trajectory of global inflation, he told parliamentarians and Bahamians at large as he led off the debate on a bill for an act for the appropriation of diverse sums of money for and towards defraying the expenses of the Bahamas for the financial year beginning July 1st, that his government can be better prepared for crisis by investing in Bahamians and in the economy so as to be better prepared to seize new opportunities. Prime Minister Davis, who also holds responsibility for the Ministry of Finance, while acknowledging growing anxiety among Bahamians about the way forward, says it is the government's duty to provide security to build a foundation for a better Bahamas.
Progress, Madam Speaker, doesn't happen overnight, but the steps required to see that progress in a real and tangible way must happen and happen now. There's an urgency with which we work, in recognition of the aspirations and dreams of the Bahamian people and the kind of Bahamas they want to live in during our next 50 years as a nation. The 2023-2024 budget builds on what is already working while establishing key new initiatives that will change life for the better. The pillars of national security, economic security, and social security represent exactly what we need to continue to build momentum toward our vision of a secure, prosperous, and fair society.
Now the Prime Minister, reflecting on his 2022-2023 budget, the way forward, recovering and rebuilding the first 20 months, took aim at the former minister-led administration and what he termed a governance crisis, chastising the former government for a ballooning debt and fiscal crisis, job scarcity, a health crisis due to the COVID-19 pandemic, learning loss, and even the Oban debacle.
We opened the economy and revived festivals and regattas, allowing the economy and job market to rebound as local businesses thrive and life returned to normal. Unemployment levels are now down. Unemployment levels are now down to pre-pandemic levels. And the nation is seeing record-breaking arrivals of visitors to our shores. If only they had called the election even earlier, Madam Speaker, the country may have benefited earlier from our evidence-based approach to pandemic
I
management.
agree with that. I'll
While
second
we reopen the economy,
that. I second that.
we prioritize protection for the more vulnerable, including the elderly and those in healthcare facilities. We conducted 172,000 free COVID tests and distributed over 1 million free medical-grade masks. Madam Speaker, choices matter. Governments do not run on autopilot, and neither do economies. That the country is moving in the right direction today is the result of a measured and strategic approach spanning many areas of policymaking.
As for what's to come for the new fiscal year, Prime Minister Davis says the 2023-2024 budget builds on last year's budget, which ends June 30th, with security being a fundamental building block of national development. Prime Minister Davis asks Bahamians to continue to work hand in hand with his administration, as he says it's because through the people, real progress will be made. For Jcn News, I'm Lissy Bastian.
Thanks for that report, Lissy. Before beginning debate on the new fiscal budget 2023-2024, members of the House of Assembly spent the first hour of today's sitting paying homage to the late George A. Smith, a former member of Parliament, cabinet minister, and diplomat. Prime Minister Philip Davis described Mr. Smith as a giant of a man who served in the Bahamian Parliament for 29 consecutive years, from 1968 to 1997.
In this honorable House, a cabinet minister, a political historian par excellence, a son of the Exuma soil, a forefather of this free, modern, democratic, and independent state we call the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. A dedicated public servant, a Bahamian nationalist, an unrepentant advocate for the progressive movement, and an ardent defender of all that was Bahamian.
The Prime Minister went on to share much of the history of Mr. Smith's political career, including his role in the majority rule and independence movements. He extended sincerest condolences to the Smith family on behalf of the people of the Bahamas and the Davis family. Deputy Prime Minister Chester Cooper described Mr. Smith as a great man and a great friend who was not only a popular person in Exuma, but also popular throughout the Bahamas because of his patriotism.
He was Exumian, true and true, but his national reach advanced the well-being of all Bahamians. It is because of George and soldiers like him that we were able to achieve majority rule in this country. I found it profoundly inspiring when Sir Arthur Fulks recalled in an article he wrote in 2005, and I quote, "I met George Smith when he was a young insurance agent back in the early 1960s. Mr. Smith's complexion would have made it easy for him to find acceptance on the white side of the Bahamian racial divide at the time. But he chose to throw in his lot with the struggle for majority rule." That was George. He believed in the progressive cause. He was a signatory to the Constitution. And it's because of George and the patriots like him that we are an independent nation today.
Leader and Deputy Leader of the official opposition, Michael Pintard, and Shannon Cartwright also shared their thoughts on the late George A. Smith and extended condolences. Here's the leader from the Free National Movement, Mr. Pintard.
George A. Smith impacted activists not just in the Progressive Liberal Party, but inside the Free National Movement. He made a contribution to this notion of being fearless in sharing your views. Secondly, speaking truth to power. Thirdly, maintaining ties across the political divide in a very meaningful way. So as we pay tribute to him, we remember all of those that worked closely with him. in those early days, FNMs and PLPs. And I remember sitting in the Senate serving alongside of Frank Smith, who became a trusted friend who provided advice even though we contested different political ideas. And so I say to the Smith family, Frank, who I know best of all of them and who I valued over the years, but I say to his wife, to his children, to all of his grandchildren, to the members of the Progressive Liberal Party, we extend our condolences from the Free National Movement and the opposition. We celebrate a life that was well lived. We celebrate a complex man who served with humility and whose contributions were many. And we pray that his soul will rest in peace and rise in glory.
In addition to being chairman of the inaugural Independence Secretariat and taking part in numerous historic groundbreaking legislation, George Smith served as the Minister of Agriculture, Fisheries and Local Government and Minister of Transport. He also served as the Bahamas High Commissioner to Singapore. As chairman of the Bahamas Telecommunications Corporation, he helped usher in cellular services in the Bahamas, and as chairman of the Hotel Corporation of the Bahamas, he led key developments in the tourism sector. George Smith died on Friday, May 26, at the age of 82 years old. Acknowledging the needs for adjustments to the National Insurance Board, particularly as it relates to contributions, Prime Minister Philip Davis announced in a statement last evening that there will be no NIB rate increase during this fiscal year, but rather a rate increase will be introduced next year on the 1st of July. Ahead of his contribution to the 2023-2024 budget debate today, Prime Minister Davis also acknowledges that the global inflation crisis has been a significant strain on household finances for many Bahamians, and the Davis administration does not wish to impose additional burdens. Added to that, the Prime Minister says the government hopes that a full year's advance notice will allow time to plan to accommodate the increase that's coming. The challenges NIB faces, according to Prime Minister Davis, is not unique to the Bahamas, as there are other social security systems around the world experiencing similar effects. The COVID-19 pandemic, changing demographics, and the realities reflected in actuarial tables have forced all to rethink how systems are operated. The Prime Minister, however, maintains that it is important for Bahamians to know that the government will use the coming year to implement significant reforms at the National Insurance Board. The Prime Minister did not reveal what the increase will be come July 2024. Meanwhile, the opposition is calling for more answers to the coming NIB rate hike. Free National Movement leader Michael Pintard, in a statement following the Prime Minister's announcement, said that the Prime Minister must provide the specifics surrounding the government's decision to increase the NIB rate. One of the men police believed to be responsible for beating another man to death is now in police custody. This past Saturday, sometime around 10 p.m., officers responded to a home in Malcolm Allotment East, where a 65-year-old man sought refuge after he was attacked by a group of unknown males, according to police reports. The victim was taken to the Princess Margaret Hospital by the emergency medical technicians for medical attention. However, he succumbed to injuries sustained in that attack sometime around 4 a.m. on Sunday. Police say they arrested a 54-year-old male resident of Malcolm Road in connection with that incident. Investigations continue. Meantime, police are seeking the public's assistance in identifying and locating a suspect responsible for a shooting incident last night. A 26-year-old male is in hospital as a result of that shooting that unfolded on West Street in Bainstown shortly after 9 p.m. on Tuesday. The victim, according to police, was walking through a track road when he was approached and subsequently shot multiple times by an unknown male. He was taken to hospital by ambulance, where he is presently listed in stable condition. As police are actively investigating, they are appealing to members of the public who may have information as it pertains to this incident to contact the Criminal Investigations Department, CID, or you can call 911 or 328-TIPS. That's 328-8477. A balance between profitability and affordability is needed when it comes to gas retailers and their wants and their needs. And that's assertion by the Prime Minister, Philip Davis, as he responded to recent actions taken by the Bahamas Petroleum Retailers Association last week. The Prime Minister says the retailers did not have to take drastic measures to get his attention.
They didn't have to not stop selling to get that attention. But I think at the end of the day, there has to be a balance here. There has to be a balance between profitability and affordability. I'm concerned about we have, unfortunately, in a vortex, right? We have a very consumptive society. Everything that we have is imported. We can't control what's happening in other jurisdictions. And a lot of times what happens in other jurisdictions impact us here in a very negative way. And so until such time as we are able to control some of those things that we can, and that's what we're working on, we'll see how best we could help the businesses to grow and be profitable.
While retailers have said the 54 cents per gallon on gasoline and 34 cents per gallon on diesel is not sustainable, Prime Minister Davis says there is room for pump owners to be profitable as is presently constructed. He says his government will continue to listen to petroleum retailers.
And we continue to listen to them to see how we can help. And the Minister of Economic Affairs will indicate that we did move to help them during last year when oil prices are just going out of the roof and things are just becoming crunch. We see an easing of inflation, we see easing of prices around the world. That will come to bear here in the Bahamas, and it takes a little while for us to catch up because of the supply chain and chain issues. But as soon as things catch up, I think there'll be a leveling off soon.
The government's position does not sit well with the retailers, the petroleum dealers, who are expected to continue agitating for better margins. We'll take a break here. We'll be right back after these commercials.